Hello, everyone. This is Josue from Empathy Cafe, where everybody's got a story that can change your heart. Welcome to the final episode of the second season of our podcast. I'm so grateful for your support and engagement over the past few months. I couldn't have made it this far without each of you. And as I wrap up this season, I want to reflect on some of the highlights, challenges, and lessons we've learned from inspiring interviews with thought leaders and experts to candid conversations about the issues that matter most. I hope this podcast has been a valuable resource for you. And of course, I'm already looking forward to what's in store for season number 3. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Today's guest is Paul Croft. Paul is a former truck driver who found his faith in an unexpected place. In 2011, he was caught doing something illegal and sentenced to a year in jail. While in jail, Paul found a Key to Freedom Bible and committed his life to Christ. After being released early, Paul became an active church member, but later faced a new challenge when he was hospitalized with Guillan Barre Syndrome. Despite this, Paul's faith remains strong, and he continues to share his story and preach today. This is One-on-One Life with Paul Croft. Welcome, Paul. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us today in the last episode of One-on-One Live podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm doing great. So
That is awesome. Paul, you are a former truck driver who found his faith in an unexpected place, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it. So let's go back to 2011. Something big happened. And I'm not talking about being incarcerated. I'm talking about something you discovered in jail that changed your life forever. Can you tell us what that was?
so I discovered a Bible. Okay, it was a few weeks into my sentence, and I discovered this Bible. This Bible is called the Key to Freedom, a very special Bible to me. At the time, I pulled it out of the library. I didn't know what it was. On the back of it, there's nothing written there. I pulled it out of the library, realized that it was a Bible, and something about it made me hold on to it. I could not put it down. So I took it back to my cell and I started reading it. And the more I read it, the more I fell in love with it. The more I fell in love with God. And it just started working on me very, very quickly, and realized that what I'd been doing in the past was not what I needed to be doing now. And I fell in love. Fell in absolute total love with reading the Bible.
So you took it and you started reading where? In the first page, or the first page of the New Testament, the Old Testament, randomly? How do you do it?
So I actually, as I was flipping through the book, there was a way to read it in a year. So there was a just a kind of a menu of how to go through it. So I started there. I started in the middle of the Bible, and I was kind of not in any certain place. I can't even remember where it was that I started, but it still got hold of me. But then when I started to look at it, I went back and I started with the Gospels, because for me, I think that the Gospels hold a very special place. And if somebody's going to start reading the Bible for the very, very first time, I think they should start at the beginning. And if you want my recommendation, start with John. The book of John is a good place to start. But reading any of the Gospels really got to me. And my wife and I read the Bible on a regular basis, and we go through it. And when we start our next cycle of it, we always start by reading the Gospels first, and then we go back to the Old Testament and start with the Old Testament. So, like I say, I'm not really sure where I started, But once I started, I was hooked.
And what hooked you? Like, what about it? What does it have the Bible that got your
You know what?
attention?
I wish I could tell you that. It's just God is so loving, so caring that no matter what we've done, He's ready to forgive us. As long as we are willing to forgive ourselves and to forgive others, God is there to forgive us. So when I was down at my lowest in jail with nobody around who was there as a real friend, I had somebody who I could talk to, and that was
Mm.
God, and He was there for me.
Do you talk with anybody else in the in jail about what was going on with you? What about your journey? Do you have anybody that was like a chaplain or a
Yeah.
fellow?
So there was
Right?
a few fellow inmates who I did have friendships with, and we did share the Bible. We were reading and comparing passages and getting through. I also had a chaplain. Originally, a chaplain came to visit me, and he's the one that told me about love. I had a real problem with love, loving myself, loving others, and he's the one that got me going on love. And so that's why I think my favorite book of the Bible is John, because John is all about love.
Mm-hmm.
Right from the very, very beginning. And of course, the most famous verse in the Bible is just spells it out. If we look
John
at John
3:16.
3:16, yeah,
That's
I
right.
mean, there's no greater love in this world than the love that God did on that at that time by giving us Jesus and by sacrificing Jesus for us, not for himself, but for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I learned, started to learn in jail, was the strength of the love of God. And it's so powerful that we will never be able to understand that.
And in what tangible ways you felt the change? Like, what was the like the moment or the period when you thought, hmm, something is really changing here? How did that go?
So it was a slow process, but it did come on suddenly, on my birthday, the 27th of May, which is tomorrow,
Yes, it's
27th of May,
tomorrow.
on my 50th birthday. I spent my 50th birthday in jail.
Uh-huh.
And on that date, I was writing a letter to my wife. I wrote many, many letters to my wife. I was writing a letter to my wife. And in the letter, I gave my life to Christ, written in the letter before I even knew that I was doing it myself.
How
Um,
special.
yeah, so it's God moved my hands to write
Yeah.
those words, to give my life to Christ on my 50th birthday. So that's a real special day in multiple ways.
Do you keep that letter?
Yes, we've kept all the letters that I wrote, but that one is especially special, because it was a moment that I did not expect. I kind
Mm-hmm.
of knew that I was going there, but I didn't know when the moment was going to arrive.
Mm-hmm. And what is it like touching heaven when you are in? I don't mean it as a swear word, but as you're in hell. Like,
Yeah,
you are in your freedom has been taken from you, and you are confined to a little cell, and yet you are touching heaven. Isn't that like a miracle or something? I don't know how to explain. Like, how do you? What was it like touching heaven when you were in hell?
so people around me knew immediately that something had happened,
Hmm.
because we had a large central section where we all congregated. And I did a lot of walking while I was in jail because there's not a lot of else to do. I mean, besides reading the Bible, watching TV, and walking, there's not a lot to do. There was games to play as well, but I did a lot of walking, walked in circles nonstop. And people noticed the difference immediately. For one thing, I was smiling, and you don't smile in jail. Um,
Hmm.
so, so I won't say I was happy, but I was happier.
Hmm.
I also I was a truck driver, and unfortunately, truck drivers have a way of speaking, and the way of speaking is not necessarily the greatest way. So I had what we call a trucker's mouth. I swore a lot. Um, I stopped swearing almost immediately. So others were swearing all around me, but I didn't swear anymore. So people noticed, and some of them had said, what has happened to you? And so that's how I got into these groups of sharing with people, because I had committed my life suddenly in a place. And they call jails hospitals for the soul,
Hmm.
because people go in there and hopefully they recover their souls. Some people don't. I was one of the ones that did, and it did work out well. And like I say, people noticed. So
Besides John, were there any passages or stories in the Bible that spoke to or resonated with you?
it's at the beginning, it was really only John.
Okay.
John really spoke to me just because of the amount of love. But I also really liked Acts, because obviously Acts was the change of Paul, the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
And the Apostle Paul went through a massive transformation, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form putting myself on that level as being equal to the Apostle Paul, but
But you can relate.
I can relate. He went through a massive transformation from a terrible, terrible, terrible person who was persecuting and killing the early Christians to being one of the greatest people that ever lived, in regards to presenting the gospel to
Hmm.
people. I mean, he wrote a good portion of the New Testament. This man was a terrible person who became one of the absolute best people that to present the gospel. So
So, what advice could you give someone incarcerated and looking to explore spirituality or religion?
talk to others. You need to share to begin with, but you need to find something like this,
Hmm.
that to get you started, because that's definitely what did it for me. You need to pray. I did a lot of prayer in jail, um, and unfortunately, one of the things that you need to do is you need to get away from the bad influences in jail, and there's a lot of them. So once I really got into reading the Bible and studying other religious materials, I spent a lot of time alone in my cell. I was lucky that I had a cell to myself. It's
Okay.
not like it's a thing. Jails are not necessarily the way you see them on television or in movies. I was in a cell that had brick walls, and a door to it. I could come and go as I pleased, and I was in it by myself. So I spent a lot of time in my cell by myself, reading the Bible, reading other religious materials, because I wanted to get away from those bad influences, because they were still swearing and they were still doing all the things that were a bad influence on me, and I was trying to change my life and get away
Hmm.
from that. So I think that's one of the things that you need to do, and seeking out a pastor, a chaplain, or somebody that can help you through this. So
Thank you. So let's fast forward to 2019. Okay, that's a few years later. You spent 7 months in the hospital and experienced a remarkable recovery afterwards from a highly complex illness. Do you want to walk us through it?
yeah. So as you said, I was a truck driver, so I was relatively active. I was my job was not just driving a truck. There was a lot of physical work involved in it. So I was quite physical. But I got this illness called Guillain Barre Syndrome. GBS for short. That's the easiest way to remember it. It's an autoimmune disorder that eats the outer coating on the nerves. So
Hmm.
if you sort of think about an extension cord for electricity, and you took all the insulation off of um, the wires, it would cause the wires to misfire. Well, that's exactly what happens with the nerves. It causes the nerves to misfire. I was paralyzed from the neck down on a ventilator with a tracheotomy, breathing through a hole in my neck. Could not move at all. When I was at my absolute worst, I could not talk, couldn't communicate at all. So it was tough. The only thing that I could talk to, the only person that I could talk to was God. So I did a lot of prayer. My wife would come and visit me. She would read the Bible to me. We read Job. We read Job a lot because Job went through a massive struggle, and I could relate to what Job was going through.
So you were conscious.
Oh, I was conscious through the whole thing. Conscious, alert, knew. I was. Yeah. There was the whole 7 months. Well, about the 1.5 to 2 months that I was completely paralyzed and unable to communicate, I was fully conscious and never lost consciousness at all. So yeah. So it's tough because you can see everything going around you. You can't communicate. I can remember one time I was sweating in bed. I was really, really warm, and I was trying to get that point across to my wife. I was trying to get it across to the nurse, and they kept asking, what's wrong? And eventually I was able to just shiver my shoulders just a little. And they said, are you cold? And I shook my head because I couldn't move my head. And I shook my head. No. And they said, so are you hot? And it's like, yes, you finally, you understand. So I went through that. Not being able to communicate. But just before I lost the use of my voice, I had a pastor come to visit me, became a very, very good friend. He came to visit me and he asked me, Paul, what do you want me to pray for? And I said, could you pray for my hands? I said, I would really like to get my hands back. And so he did a prayer and we prayed for my hands. And then a few days later, I had the tracheotomy and I lost my voice. And I thought I should have prayed for my voice. But think about it, and if I got my voice back, all I can do is talk and sing in church or whatever. But if I got my hands back, I could do everything. I could work. I could use a phone. I could learn to talk with my hands, whatever it took. So I thought that hands were the best thing. And as I started the long road to recovery, the first thing that came back were my fingers on my hands. And when they came back very, very powerful. So much so that I was able to pick up a smartphone and type on a smartphone. So I could type messages to my doctors, my nurses, my wife, anybody visiting me, tell them what I wanted, what I needed. And the doctors were amazed at how strong my hands were because they didn't expect them to come back that quick. And my hands work 100%. There was 2 other people that were going through the same thing in hospital that I was, or very similar. And both of them left the hospital without the use of their hands. One of them couldn't hold a cup, couldn't hold a spoon or fork or anything like that because she just did not have that control of her fingers. I was feeding myself and I was using a phone. The only difference was that prayer that pastor did for me to get my hands to work again. So it was a struggle, but God got us through it. And I say us because it wasn't just me. My wife went through it in as much as I did.
So you do believe in miracles?
Absolutely, I believe in miracles. I share my miracle stories all the time. It is an absolute miracle, the recovery that I had. And it's an absolute miracle the way my hands came back, because I still do struggle with some slight disabilities, but my hands, the things that I need the most, my hands work best. So.
Paul, I'm going to ask you a hard question, okay? But I must ask it. What do you tell to somebody that is praying or has been praying for a long time, but there is no change in the disability that they are experiencing?
Okay, you got me. That is a hard question, but God works in mysterious ways. We know that. And sometimes the answer to the prayer that we give is God's answer and not ours. There could be a reason why God has not answered that prayer in the way that you want it to. In the same way that why did I get sick? I was so faithful to God. I was doing things the right way, but God still allowed me to get sick. Well, the reason I feel that God allowed me to get sick was so I have a story to tell. So I have a story so I can share with you. I can share with other people the stories of miracles. So if God isn't healing somebody at the present time, there could be a reason for it that God knows. And I think we just have to accept that God is right. God knows what's the best. And maybe that person just isn't ready for the healing at the present time. Maybe they just need more, they need to spend more time praying and being with God.
You said to me that's, and this is not scripted, what I'm saying right now. But to me, that's the most difficult thing to accept,
Yeah.
because I am on a, this is my 5th year on May 28th, so Sunday,
Okay.
will be 5 years that I am on disability due to mental health issues. And I do have a bunch of physical health problems as well that just those per se would make life, they make life very difficult. There is no miracle happening, and I am more than ready to be healed. But you know what? Before I, I'm not meaning to put you on the spot here as my
That's
guest.
fine.
I respect you very much, and otherwise I wouldn't have agreed to talk with you. There is one verse in the Bible that allows me to be at peace with my situation, even if there is no miracle happening. And it's the same person that you like so much, Paul, in the Bible. He mentions that he had this, we don't know exactly what it was, some illness that he had,
Yeah.
and he prayed 3 times.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, I can't imagine what that must have been like, because he was a man of prayer. He's one of the biggest men in history, in Christianity. To imagine him praying to God, I mean, I'm sure God listened, right? God listened. God talked to him directly on the
Yeah.
cloud, right? So I'm sure God listened and didn't speak for 2 times, and waited for the 3rd time that he prayed fervently and said, you know what? Let my grace be sufficient. And oh, Paul, I'm holding to that, because if it weren't because of that post, I would be so mad at you. I would be mad. I would be so resentful, because why do you get healed and I'm not healed, right?
We have to realize that God has his timetable and we have our timetable. If you were to get healed of all your ailments, would you be doing what you're doing today? Or would you be too busy doing other things? So is that maybe why God is doing this? I mean, people ask, why do little babies get sick? Why do little babies die when they've done nothing? And we don't have those answers, unfortunately. And I understand where you're coming from, and I would love for you to be healthy. I'd love to see you standing in front of the church again, preaching, but maybe that's not what God wants for you. And so maybe you're reaching people through not being perfectly healthy anymore by doing the other things that you're doing. So we never know these answers that God gives, unfortunately. So
I can't wait. I can't wait for Jesus to come, Paul.
yes, yeah, yeah,
But when Jesus comes, when I get my turn to talk to him.
Yeah.
It comes that there will be literally billions of people waiting in line. When I get my turn way into eternity to talk to him, I don't think I will ask him for reasons why didn't you heal me. I think I will just be in awe
Yeah.
and cry and just throw my crown to his feet and just uh, like worship him and what can I say, right? Because nothing is compared to what he did for us and then his love.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to worry about what happened on this short time on Earth. When we went through whatever it is, 70, 80, 90 years of hard times, when we're going to have an eternity of wonderful times ahead of us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Paul, um, what do you do? You were preaching not too long ago in Winnipeg. You are sharing your story. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I share my story. I attend churches. I've attended churches all across Manitoba. I'm working on some others in Saskatchewan right now. Hopefully, we'll be able to present my story again. I do it as a testimony, a sermon. I'm definitely not a pastor or a preacher. I don't put myself on that level, but I have a story to share, and I think that that's
You
important.
do.
So I also have a blog, and my blog is listed at the bottom of the screen there, I believe, but it's called Shiny Side Up. And that is a reference to a truck driving term that we use. When truck drivers are driving down the road, they always want to keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down. And I always want to keep my shiny side up and the dirty side down. So
I love that
I
name.
don't want to see the dirty side at all. So when you're talking to me, all I want you to see is my shiny side. So that's where my blog comes from. I try to post about once a week. Sometimes it does not work out because of time or just writer's block sometimes. But I share a lot, and most of my story is listed up there. So.
Shiny side up. Will you do me a favor when we finish talking? Add in the comments um, below, add the website and
Sure.
anything that you want to show us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to our show. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Um, I look forward to seeing you in person one
Eventually.
day.
Yes,
Um,
eventually again.
Probably. Eventually we will see each other again.
So
So thank you very much.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I thank you for having me. This is another wonderful experience. So
Thank you. And thank you all, fellow empaths, for watching live or listening to the podcast. Um, I'm really happy that we had these conversations. We've had 9 shows on this season, the second season. We are going to take a break for the summer, and hopefully we will come back next fall. But remember, everybody's got a story that can change your heart, and your story matters. I love you all. Bye bye.